Okay, we are live. Hello, friends. It is very nice to see everyone again. Thank you all so much for joining. And thank you, by the way, for okay, can I get a sound check for everyone? I'm a little bit rusty, huh? Haven't done this in a while. All right. Hello, Rignard. Field Entertainment, is it delayed to 8 p.m. from 5 p.m.? Nope, it's not. It is currently 5 p.m. PST. So I want to introduce you guys to our wonderful guest today, who is Zach, and he is the CEO of Warp. And I'm actually going to let Zach introduce himself.
Cool. Thank you for having me on, Tina. It's awesome to be here. Thank you for people who are tuning in. Like Tina said, I'm Zach. I'm the founder and CEO of Warp. Warp is a AI development tool. It's basically a platform where you can sort of ask your computer to build stuff for you or do any kind of development tasks. My personal background is I've been an engineer for a really long time. So I was an engineer at Google back in the day. I used to run engineering on the Google Docs and Sheets team. I built a lot of Google Sheets. I am a second-time startup founder. I'm a dad. I have a dog. I currently live in New Mexico. So anyhow, psyched to be here and have this conversation.
Just to clarify, he is a dad of a human and of a dog.
I have both. I have a human baby and I have a dog baby.
Yes, gotta be clear these days, you know? You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. And thank you again for coming on here. I'm really excited for this conversation. I feel it's going to be a spicy conversation. We
Let's
had a
do
conversation prior to this, guys, and I was like vibe coding. And Zach was like, oh, I have thoughts. I'm like, great, excellent. Let's talk about your thoughts. This is going to be really exciting. So thank you so much, everybody who's joining. Okay, everybody can hear us. Wonderful. Sound check is good. Oh, hey, Ibrahim. So, yeah, Ibrahim, let me know if I don't know if I say something. Let me know. But I think we should be good. All right. Should we start off really spicy, Zach?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down to talk about anything.
All right. Okay, great. So let's talk about vibe coding. You know, after Andre Karpathy went like, oh, vibe coding, coolest thing ever, you know, vibe code everything, and it really just picked up everywhere. And everybody started like vibe coding. It's become very trendy these days to do the vibe coding. How do you feel about vibe coding?
I feel okay about vibe coding. I guess, how spicy should I be? So I'm not
Spicy, guys.
like
Scale of 1 to 10. How spicy do you want Zach to be? Write it in the comments.
Look, I'm working on a platform where there's a lot of people who use it to vibe code, so I don't really want to hate on vibe coders. I guess my spiciest take on vibe coding is that when you're vibe coding on as like a professional engineer, which is like kind of that's like what I'm doing. It's really easy to create stuff that has like a lot of bugs, or could have security holes, or it could be that like, almost by definition, if you're vibe coding, you're not even like paying attention to what the code is. And if you don't understand the code and you're working on like a really complicated thing, then there's like there's just like higher risk, but there's also just like risk of like wasting time, because you can end up building something that you can never, like the other engineers on your team will never let you merge, and for good reason. So I'm not like anti-vibe coding for like I'm doing some fun side project, or I actually think it's an awesome thing for people who don't know how to code to be able to build stuff. That's like incredible. But like I'm just so like in the world of working with people who like code for a living, and it can cause problems. And so even though Warp is, I think, like 20% of our paying customers are using it to vibe code, which is cool, maybe 80% are using it in more professional development setting. And so we're trying to build a bunch of stuff that makes like it's like for like responsible vibe coding, or vibe coding that you can actually get it so that the stuff you've built is actually possible to ship. That's like the thrust, and one of the ways that we're sort of different than some of the other tools out there is like we're really trying to make it so that people who are building stuff in Warp understand what they're building, can even, like, if you're not a coder, can like learn as you go. So having like the agent explain to you what it's doing, and can get to something where it's like you're kind of up leveling yourself as an engineer as you're using the tool, rather than just being like, I don't give a shit about what it's doing. So that's my, I don't know if that's as spicy as you want, but that's kind of where I'm at.
The chat is asking for 10 out of 10. I would rate that like maybe a 6. Maybe we can get more intense later.
You want more spice?
But
I'm a pretty measured person. Like the head of growth and marketing at Warp keeps telling me to like, he's like trying to train me. I don't know if he's watching this. I hope not. But like he's trying to train me to like say spicier shit because it gets picked up more. And it's not exactly my nature. Like I'm like more of a balanced type person. So that I'll try and amp it up more. But like that is what I truly think.
It's all good. It's all good. I think natural is good. Well, actually, later on we talk about the launch that you just did, in which Zach was on a horse. I don't know how many of you guys have actually watched that. I think that was like kind of your real personality, wasn't it? You're like,
I was all, so that idea came out of like we were at like a company retreat, and we were like had a couple drinks, and we're putting out all these features that are for coding on Warp, and it's this really stupid idea. We're like, oh, code on Warp, that sounds like a cow. And then we're like, that would, it would be cool, let's do a cowboy theme thing. And then we got really into it. We're like what if we made a Western around agents? And it's the thing, we just internally we're like, this is so cool. And then I was like, you know what, I'll do the demo on a horse. And we had fun doing it. We have, it's like we got some venture capital dollars to try and like spend and make a splash. We're like, screw it, let's make a Western, and I'll be on a horse. And it was super fun, actually.
Let me actually show people in case you haven't seen it. I did send out an email about this as well, but just on the detour, I do want to, just so you know what I'm talking about here, guys. I'm not just like making stuff up.
If it's helpful, I can even like.
Oh yeah, why don't we actually wear that for the entire thing while we do screen capture?
I don't think I'm gonna wear this for the entire thing, but if you want to see I can have this cowboy hat on for a second while you do this.
I don't know if I can actually.
Hi, I'm Zach, the founder and CEO of Warp. Agents create a lot of code that almost works. Best case, it all works perfectly. Worst case, you take down prod. Even with the best coding agents like Warp, engineers still need to steer agents in a tight feedback loop. Prompt, plan, review, edit, test, and repeat until you're...
You guys can hear the audio, right?
I can hear it.
Okay, good. Yeah, so there's that. And this is the part I do want to show you guys, what we were talking about.
Free to try. Jeez. How's that? That's okay?
Yeah.
And it like that? All right.
Yeah, so that was the part.
It was about 110 degrees out there.
Like,
was
outside
LA.
Stop being on a horse now. Yeah. So we'll get back to that. But yeah, so just so everybody knows, that actually is Zach's true personality. So let's go back to like the vibe coding talk, right? Because I think like what you said was very interesting, because the way that it seems to me when people are vibe coding, right? You started off with just people like Andre Kaparthi being like, oh, you can like vibe code some stuff and then seeing what happens. But people really took that to heart, and people who don't know how to code started vibe coding. And they started like building these projects, which is really cool, because I don't think anybody realized like how empowering it was for people who don't know how to code to be able to start building these projects. So when you said that, how do you make vibe coding more responsible? Like, how do you do that in a way so that people actually know what it is that they're building? Is this something that Warp is targeting, or do you have any personal opinions by how it is to build more responsibly? Because a lot of the audience that we have over here, and write this down in the chat if you don't know how to code, just say like no code. Or like, just write no code. For people who don't know how to code, how do they build these things if they're vibe coders?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So like, I think I do think it's awesome that people who you don't need to know how to code to build something. Like that's super empowering. For people who like doing it and who are like, getting the itch and like enjoying building stuff with vibe coding tools, which, Warp is in that bucket. I think it pays to spend like a little bit of time just like learning like the big concepts, honestly. And doing that, honestly, like watching your videos is probably a good place to do that. Like there's a ton of good content where you should probably know like what's a database? What would I use a database for? Or like what's an API? What is what's HTML? What's JavaScript? So I would invest at least in learning like the big ideas. I don't necessarily think you need to learn like the syntax of coding. What I mean by like the syntax for people who aren't coders is like the aspects of the programming language themselves. Like here's what like a for loop looks like and like a variable, and like I think that type of stuff maybe is going to become more of an implementation detail. But I think learn the big things, and the reason to do it is because there is a failure mode with vibe coding where you can get something like 80 or 90% to what you want, and then maybe it has like bugs, and maybe it doesn't look the way you want or doesn't work the way you want. And like if you don't have like the conceptual language, it's hard to guide the agent to get to the outcome that you want. The other thing is like you can use a tool like Warp, and I think actually Warp is really good at this compared to some of the other tools that are out there, to have it like explain what it's doing. And so like you could take, you can kind of take the approach that like you just don't care what it's doing, you just care about the output. But I do think it's like you can learn a ton because you have like a smart, alien brain that's helping build the thing for you, that can tell you why it's doing it, that you can ask questions about like, why do you do this? What does this code do? Why is it set up like this? And so it's kind of like a great learning opportunity if you take it. Now, I think like there's some like analogy here with how people use ChatGPT, like if they're in university or whatever. It's like you could use ChatGPT to like just like write all your papers or whatever, and you can probably like pass. Or you can be like, no, I want to use ChatGPT to like understand stuff better, and then I'll write my own paper, but it's like a learning tool. And so it just like depends a little bit what you want to get out of it and like what you want to learn. But I would focus on learning. It's pretty fun, interesting stuff to learn, and like you're never going to be at any kind of disadvantage from knowing more about how like computers and coding work. Like it's like, to me, it's like a fundamental skill people should probably invest in. What do you think? And we're not supposed to ask you questions.
So you can ask me as well.
Yeah.
I think so. I kind of, how do I say? There are some people who are in the camp of like you really must learn how to code, right? Like you gotta learn how to code at some point. It's fine, and maybe you don't know the syntax, but you do need to know, and you can use it as a learning tool. I would say I'm more in the middle. I'm actually totally fine with people not knowing how to code, in my opinion. That's why like in the boot camps that we teach as well, we always have a no code track as well as a code track, because I think both are viable ways of doing things. Is it true that it's a lot cheaper, a lot more scalable? You're gonna not have any vibe bugs if you do know how to code and not just vibe code? Yes, absolutely. Is it true that if you do vibe code something, you probably have to go give it to an engineer at some point to make it production ready? I think also very true. However, I do think people who don't know how to code, it's fine that you don't. Like as long as you understand the limitations of what you're working with and you're good at prompting, you're good at understanding how to catch these bugs, and when to know that you need to start asking for help, right? I think once you understand the limitations, and also of course like learning the structure of things, you can know how to do like PRDs or PRPs, for example, without knowing how to code, right? You can understand what a backend is, what a database is, when do you use a vector database, vector store versus something else. These are things that conceptually you can all understand how to do, and that will get you most of the way there, in my opinion. So I think you can actually, as long as you're building something that isn't really, really niche, and it's also not something that needs to be like massively scaled, you can actually vibe code some really, really impressive things and have it put into production as well. In some ways, I actually think vibe coding is a distinctive skill compared to engineering, traditional coding and traditional engineering. Because for me, like I've done both. I have a background in computer science and engineering as well, and then I also do like the vibe coding approach. I actually think they're really different approaches to doing things fundamentally.
I have a question for you. Like, are there any apps that you use that have been vibe coded?
See, I think there have been. I'm pretty sure. I don't think
Okay.
anybody goes like, I vibe coded this entire app, try to see if you can fix the bugs. I don't think anybody
Right.
has told me that. I do think probably, well, I would say like 80% demo vibe coded. Maybe the other like 20% is like someone scaling it properly. I think like for certain tools, like I'm trying to think. I don't want to call it out because I'm not really sure, but I think like for certain tools that are very niche, but like serve a very like singular function, like one or two like singular clever functions, things like
Yeah.
macros, for example. I do think those are probably vibe coded, and maybe like I hope somebody went and actually like made sure that it's done.
That's I think exactly right. So I think like vibe coding is creating like a new kind of software, which is like personal software. It's like a good example. So the person on our team who vibe codes the most is he's like an engineering recruiter for us. Like he's on the talent team. And if you look at the amount of like Warp credits or requests he's used, it's like 10x everyone else on our engineering team. And he's made he made an MCP server that accesses our like applicant tracking system, which is this thing called Greenhouse, and like pulls applicants and like summarizes where they're at and like sends things into Slack for us. And he like loved doing it. It was like, and he doesn't know how to code at all. He's like, I just kept telling Warp, he's like, this is what I want, this is what I want. And it's like it took him forever. And it's like, and then he went to an engineer on our team, and it was like 50,000 lines of code or something like insane. He's like, how do I get this deployed? And we're like, you don't. Like, there's no way, like that thing is never ever going to be deployable, but you can continue to use it as like your personal thing. And so it's created this like way for people to automate parts of their own life or their own work, which I think is really interesting because like no one would ever have invested in building this thing for our, for Mac on our team before, but now that Mac can build it for himself, he's like, hell yeah, I'm building this thing. So I think that's like where vibe coding is really, really interesting and different from normal coding. But what I don't see, at least not yet, is like there's not like an app that I use for like my personal life or my job that, to my knowledge, has been like vibe coded from scratch. And I think it'll be really interesting if we get to that point. But I like, and maybe other people are, but I haven't personally had that experience yet.
Do you think it will? And looking at some of the comments right now from Eric, I love vibe coding, but I also use the tools to understand what the code is doing in the background. Feel it's important, especially when something goes wrong. That's very true. Vibe coding for open source is my main focus from Rosemary.
Oh, interesting.
From Richard, it's like hackers hack code for themselves, not for production. And Juan, vibe coding use cases are probably best fit for internal company use. And David asks, will AI do the debugging for you through specifically focused prompts? Let's hold on to that thought, David. Actually, I'm going to ask Zach to do some demos in just a little bit to see if we can answer that question. So I do want to ask that. Zach, do you think we will ever get to that point in which people can vibe code things and be in production?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I think I think that I'm just following like the trend line of the models. And I think the question is like, are the models still kind of growing exponentially in terms of how smart they are? Or is there more of like a leveling off or an S curve? I don't work on the models, so I don't really know, but like, I'm definitely not betting against them. And so, yeah, I think we're gonna get to a point where these models are really, really smart, and that they can not only like create code, but they can create like maintainable, shippable, secure, scalable code, like the stuff that like these engineers at Google who I work with like are really, really good at doing. I don't see why that wouldn't happen. I just don't think it's happened. It's not where we are today. And I don't know the time frame. Maybe I bet it's not that long. I bet it's a year or two. But it's not where we're at today. And so, I think where we're at today is more what we were saying before. It's like it's great for personal projects. You can use it for production stuff. I actually really feel strongly about this. You just need to use it in a different way than just like let it rip and just hope it does the right thing. I think you can still save a ton of time if you're a pro developer using tool like Warp by telling it what you want it to do. You just have to watch what it's doing, understand it, correct it, review it, and like use it in like a controlled way. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish. Like, I mean, that these agents are going to be able to do what I'm able to do and probably better.
Okay. Here's like.
Are you?
I'm actually not.
You're not fascinated. So I'm like reversing. Why? Can you tell me why not?
Yes. Okay, let me clarify. I don't think it's the tool itself. I think, yes, it will get there. I think it's the people is the problem. The reason is because when most people vibe code something or when they want to build something, they're generally not very good at knowing what they're building. And however amazing at coding, vibe coding tools and base models are, they unfortunately, as of yet, are not able to read your mind, especially when you don't.
I get. By the way, I don't disagree with this. This is a fantastic. Like, I love this point. I wrote like a blog post on this like 2 years ago when ChatGPT was coming out, where I'm like, the fundamental limitation is like my ability to express my intent, which I think is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a computer can't read your mind. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I fully agree with this take too. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, that was pretty much my point. I think it's not even if they could read your mind. People are like messy creatures. I don't even know what I'm thinking half the time. So
right.
If you're trying to build something, and this is why I always encourage people to like write a PRD or a PRP these days, like a product requirements prompt. So it forces you to actually think through what you're doing. Because if you're just like, oh, I think I'm gonna like build this app to make me more productive. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, do you even know what that means? Probably not. So I think like people are not able to express themselves in a way that can actually produce the thing. They'll be like, this is not what I wanted, but they also don't know what they want to begin with. So that I think is the fundamental limitation.
But I agree with that, by the way. But can I challenge that a little bit? I think what I was saying is like, I think if you as a vibe coder, like let's say 2 or 3 years from now, get to a point where you've like prompted your way to an app that that you like the behavior of it. So you don't know, let's say you don't know shit about how it's built, but you're like, I like the behavior of this. I do think that we're going to get to a point where the models are good enough so that thing's going to be built in a launchable way without like, huge risk. It'll be built scalable. It'll be built like it's engineered well. That's what I think. I do think you're still going to have this challenge of like, everyone is not like a perfect product manager and like, can't express what they want built correctly. But I think that the quality of the builds that these tools are gonna be able to do is going to get better and better.
That's fair. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. So I guess like, can humans get better and better at managing?
No, humans are the limit in some sense right now, at least. And like, so yeah, I basically agree with what you're saying, but I don't think it totally contradicts what I was saying.
Makes sense. You know what? This is actually a good segue. Would you, instead of just talking about the theoretical and the hypotheticals, would you like to actually show us on Warp how it is that we can vibe code something or build something? I don't know what the right term is these days. How we can build something on Warp and use it as a learning tool. Use it as a learning tool along the way to learn about how it is we can build things better. What's like how fast do you think you can not vibe code something?
I'm gonna vibe code something. I think there's no way that I can build something in a few minutes without vibe coding it. So I'm gonna just make some apps if that sounds cool.
Yeah. Does that sound good to Pat? Say apps. Or Zach make apps. That doesn't rhyme actually. But just write Zach make apps onto the chat if you want to look at it.
I'm gonna build some silly apps, and then maybe I can show actually how I how I also use Warp to fix like issues in Warp, and Warp's like a million lines of Rust code, so it's different than the vibe coding use case, but I'll show both. It's always, you do a live demo. I have no idea if it'll work perfectly, but that's part of the fun of it. But yeah, you want me to start doing that?
Yeah, please do. So just a little bit of context for people who haven't used Warp before. Would you mind just briefly explaining like what's the thesis of Warp?
Yeah.
What did you build it for?
Yeah. So, and you can see my screen, okay?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so brief history of Warp. Warp started as like a reimagination of the terminal. Like that, the concept was like developers use the terminal all the time. It's a really powerful tool if you get good at using it. It's a really hard tool to use. And so we spent the first part of Warp, like year and a half, just trying to build a terminal with a much nicer user experience. And you can still use Warp like that just to show people. So I can like run commands here in Warp. I can, cd into directories or list files or like run git commands. It's a really, really nice experience using the command line. And a lot of people like to use it just for this. The thing that has changed in the last couple of years at Warp is like we've basically made it into a general interface for telling your computer what to do, not just in the language of terminal commands, but in English or natural language. And so I'll vibe code something. And so the way that I'll do this in Warp is like I'll literally just speak to it. I find that to be most efficient for prompting. I'm going to have it build. I asked people on my team what would be a fun thing to build, and someone who's really young was like, you should build a Bongo Cat Pomodoro timer. I didn't know what Bongo Cat was, but I went and looked it up. So I'm going to build that, and I'll build that as a web app. Does that sound cool?
Does that sound cool to everybody? Say yes in the chat.
I mean, or I could build something else, but like this will be really easy to build, and I think we'll show some stuff. So I'm going to say,
Zach, I don't know what a Bongo Cat is either, actually. So
you don't know what Bongo
Cat is? Explain, but I'll find out after you build it. So,
okay. I thought I was gonna be the only one who didn't know what Bongo Cat is. Bongo Cat is like this silly internet thing that like
okay, I do know what
bongos.
Got it. Does anybody not know Bongo Cat? Right? No in the chat if you don't know what Bongo Cat is.
And do people know what a Pomodoro timer is? I should say that too.
Okay. If you are watching this, if you're watching anything I'm on and not know what a Pomodoro is, I will feel very sad. So let's just assume people know what a Pomodoro is.
Okay. So I'm going to say, can you make me a new directory, please? Actually, I'm going to use Warp has this way that makes this even easier now. So I'm going to click this create new project. And I'm going to say, can you make me a Bongo Cat themed Pomodoro timer, make it using next.js, and it should have like some fun graphics and a cool countdown thing, and just build it the best way that you want. I'm literally just talking to Warp here. I'm going to tell it to build it. And this is like, to me, this is vibe coding. This is how you think of vibe coding, right? This is like a 0 to 1 vibe code use case. And it's going to take a second to get going here.
A couple questions.
Get screwed up.
Doing that. So people have a question. Can I code on my smartphone using Warp?
We don't really have that. Can you oh, actually there is a hold on. Make a new one. So I did this before as practice, and it's going into that. And so I don't want to do that.
So you're doing the vibe. There's a term for it. It's called the vibe. It's not the restart. It's when you revive everything. What is it called?
I'm reviving because I practiced this earlier. So what I'm doing, I noticed what it's doing. So I'm like, no, don't do it this way. I just talk to it. It's going to go back to the projects directory. And you can see it's doing, I think that the tool that's probably most familiar to people, if people are watching haven't used Warp, is Claude Code, where you can just purely prompt to have it do things for you. And so Warp works a little bit like that, but it has, in my opinion, a much nicer, friendlier, easier interface to do that. It also gives you a bunch of features in the UI level that are, I think, make it better for this. So it started over. It made this thing Bongo Cat Pomodoro new. It did get init for me. It's following this task list, which the task list, it's going to set up a new Next.js project with TypeScript. It's going to design some graphics for me, build the interface, and yeah, it's going to go ahead and set this up for me. Now, it's kind of boring to watch just one agent go. Do you care if I do a second agent too?
No, please go ahead. And somebody just said bro has 5,000 IDs in his doc anyway, so might as well.
I do. I'm using everything, just to be clear. I also, some of these are kind of competitor products, so I always am testing them out. So anyway, one thing you'll notice here is like this agent over here needs my attention. So it's popped up this thing. It wants me to look at the code. I do think this is one area where Warp has a really, really nice interface. So I can see the code here. If I wanted to, I could just pop it open and edit it. Like I could literally just type in here. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll just accept these changes and I'm going to let it run so we don't have to manually approve everything. So I click this little fast forward thing down here. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do a second project. This one I'm going to do, I'll make a database visualizer. And if, you know, we use in Warp SQLite, which is like a file-based database to do some stuff. So I'm going to have it work with SQLite files. And this one I'll just purely prompt and I'll say, can you make me a new directory called SQLite database visualizer underscore Tina and create a new Git repo in there. And we're going to build a CLI-based database visualizer using Python that takes a database file, an SQLite database file as an input and prints out in ASCII characters the relationships between the different tables in the database.
So to make sure we're all on the same page here, could you explain what you mean by CLI-based database visualizer for anybody who doesn't know what that means?
Yeah, so database, I'm not totally sure how far to go, but like database in this case is like, it's a place where we're storing data related to Warp's app. Visualizer in this case means a way, like if you have like a database, it's a bunch of tables essentially. Here, I'll do some education stuff. I'll be like, you know, can you tell me how databases are typically structured? And maybe draw some examples in ASCII art of a generic database so that I can learn how SQL databases work. This is like, you know, you could obviously do this in something like ChatGPT too, but it's cool to do it. You know, you can do it right here in context in Warp as well. And this will give you, this is kind of what I mean about like learn as you go. So this is explaining what a database is. A database, you know, is a place you store data. There are different tables. Think of tables, if you're not familiar with databases, as like kind of individual spreadsheets that have columns. Each row in one of these columns is a like entity or like item in your database. And then databases that have multiple tables tend to have relationships. And so one of the, what I mean by relationships is like, imagine that you had a database of like people who worked at your company or went to school with you. You could have one table that has all of their names and another table that has all of their addresses. And then those would have a relationship to each other. So you would have one, like you could look up all of the people who live in a particular city, for instance. So anyway, this is like a simple example here of like a what a database schema might look like. Tina, is this making sense?
It's making sense to me. So I'm looking at the chat right now. Say for anybody who says that they're completely lost, don't worry about it. This is like vibe learning. Like, you know, you just you can vibe learn the thing as we go. You know, we're just.
Are people lost? Do you want me? I don't know
worries.
how.
I think
Okay.
I think it will make a lot more sense to people if they actually see it. So for anybody, basically just think about it. It's a database, and we're gonna visualize.
Yeah.
What happened? Sorry. That was
So I'm
me.
gonna start this agent also. And so just like the paradigm in Warp, so that people get it, is each one of these like panes here you can think of as like running its own agent. And so right now I actually have 3 of them running. We can go over here and see how this Bongo Cat database is going. And it actually looks like, I'm sorry, this Bongo Cat Pomodoro timer. So it looks like it actually built something here. Let's take a look at what it's built. Here we go. What do we think of this?
It's an orange cat.
I think we can make this look a little bit better. But I think it basically did what I asked it to do. And so this is like going to start the timer for me. And so this is saying I'm having a focus session going. Let's see if we can make this like look a little cooler. If we have time to do that, Tina, like should I do an iteration on it?
Let's do it.
So I'm going to go ahead and just like snap a screenshot of this, which is something that I'll do if I'm vibe coding. I'll quit here. I'll be like, can you make this look a little bit more modern? Maybe try rendering the cat in 3D for me. You can use something like 3.js to do that. And maybe spread out the controls and make them a little bit simpler for me. I'd like a little bit more of a modern style with them. So I'll do like an adjustment phase here. One thing that's cool in Warp, just to call out, and this speaks to my point earlier about sort of like vibe coding, is that in Warp, we're trying to make it really easy to see the changes as the agent does stuff. And so I can pop open this view in Warp, which is essentially what are all of the things that have been vibe coded here. I can look through the structure of the files, and then I can ask Warp really easily to just like explain parts of it to me. So if you're like trying to learn React, for instance, you can highlight this here and be like, okay, I want to add this as context and have the agent explain what it's doing. So I could open up a new pane. I could add this as context. I added it over here, but I'm going to do it over here. And I could be like, can you explain this code section to me, please? And so I'm hoping I'm not doing too much stuff for you right now. I tend to do a lot of stuff while the agents work because I get impatient. So I'm just going to hop back over here for 1 second and let this go to completion and let this go to completion and then go over here. And so, yeah, this is like, I think a really good thing here. So this is React use effect hook that handles playing an audio notification when a Pomodoro session completes. It explains it to you in detail, and just like depending on the level of understanding you want to gain, I think it's a really like nice way of working with the agent. Let's see. So I have 2 things cooking here.
Sorry to interrupt. Could I let's answer a few questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Answer a few questions here. First, okay, so the first question is, what is the LLM Warp is using?
Yeah, so right now it's using Sonnet. You can choose. If you don't choose and stay on auto, we try to do some smart stuff around like, we'll use different LLMs for different stuff actually. But the default at the moment, and this is kind of always subject to change, is Claude, is Sonnet 4.
Cool. So let's see some other questions. Somebody said, glad to see Warp installs on Open. I don't know how to pronounce this word. OpenSUSE, SUSE, as well as having an app image. Good work on that from Richard Hack.
Thank you. That's a Linux user. Yeah, we're on. We did fully native builds on Linux and Windows, and in case there are developers who are interested in how Warp is built, it's completely built in Rust, and like all of this like UI is rendered in our own sort of internal UI framework and is GPU accelerated. And anyhow, that's I'll nerd out for a sec.
So yeah, actually, we can maybe do this after we finish these demos, because I do want to also talk about, because we do have people who are people who do have an engineering background, and I think a lot of what Warp can deliver as well is for people who are not just vibe coding, right? Like they're really
Correct.
into a database. So I'd love to be able to show people like what that actually looks like. And I think it would also be a good comparison point, because when people like talk about AI assisted coding now, like the first question everybody comes up with is like, oh, like why is there, it's like, what's the difference between this one and like 5 other different ones, right? So I think
Totally.
probably would show you why it is that you want to use Warp, not something just like Bolt if you're vibe coding.
Yeah. I mean, happy to explain that whenever you think a good time is.
We
When's
can
good?
maybe we can finish off these demos, and then we can jump into, maybe you can explain a little bit about how to use Warp if you are a developer.
Okay. Yeah. So these two things are still cooking here, but I think we're getting close, actually. This is just making a README file, and this is doing unit tests. I think it's making a sample DB. It's really thorough in how it does something like this, and it's going to test it. We're almost built.
So it looks like, from what I can see here as well, with Warp, you actually do go through the proper process of building something, like actually having unit tests and things like that. I think that's actually a big differentiator between what we would call just like a pure vibe coding tool, where you just try to get something to work, and it's usually like, just as long as it kind of works in a very specific use case, then it would be fine. But it looks like you're very thorough. And
it's very thorough. Yeah. It's really engineered to be producing, again, what I think of as like production quality code.
Mm-hmm.
I think sort of like I mentioned earlier, I think 80% of people who are using Warp are pro developers. It is cool, like I said, for vibe coding, and it's like, I think it's a great actual way to learn more of what's going on. But yeah, it's really engineered to be used in a pro setting. So let's see, we are close here. I'm going to be like, let's run it. It's doing some cleanup right now, trying to get into a good spot. Okay. We are running. Let's see if it made something that looks any cooler. Yeah. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, like, this is mind-blowing. To me, this is so cool. So we have a very fancy 3D bongo cat. Did it, for all intents and purposes, like zero-shotted, right? Like there was no bugs or compiler errors, or this may not be like exactly what I would want to publish as an app, but it did what I asked, which is pretty awesome. And then let me see if our other one has also worked. So I'll be like, can you run this against Warp's SQLite database? And we'll see if this works. And so this is showing off one other thing I think that makes Warp really good for like more like production stuff, is like it has a bunch of internal knowledge. Like the LLM doesn't know anything about Warp, so we've set up context so it can do things like this. And let's see if it can show anything cool here. So it is certainly visualizing it. So now it's making this ASCII visualization. It's a very comprehensive database schema, and let's see how it looks. It's complicated. This isn't as nice as I would like it to look, but anyhow, it did this as well. I think, why don't I pause on the demos and like we could keep talking? Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good. We can let it kind of do its thing. Would you like to, going back to what I asked earlier, for people who want to be building things that are production ready, right? Like, and it's not just vibe code one shot something. This seems to be where like Warp would excel a lot more at, like where it really stands out. Could you maybe explain a little bit about how that works? I don't know if you have any demos prepared for that, and that's fine. But how do we like build using Warp if you already have an extensive code base that's already there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I could have it build something in Warp really quickly. I'll have it do that, and then I'll just talk about it while it's doing that. So Warp, for instance, I'll open this is Warp's code base. It's quite extensive. The way that I would use something like this to build in Warp is much more oriented around like telling the agent how to build something than it is just telling it the outcome that I want. And so, for instance, like to build something in Warp here, like Warp is missing, we're missing a tooltip on this UI item here, right? This like lets you like see your directory and switch it. So the way I would do this in Warp, I would say like, we are missing a tooltip on the working directory prompt chip in the universal developer input. You will want to see how other tooltips are implemented in Warp's codebase, specifically within the universal developer input. Follow the same exact pattern of adding that tooltip on hover. You'll want to use a mouse state handle and existing patterns, and build the tooltip so that it says switch directory. And so a much more detailed way, first of all, on like how to do stuff. Still thinking here. Hopefully the voice worked. It's gonna work. Yeah, I don't know why that took so long. And then I'll just provide a context in a much more detailed way. So I'll hit like the @ key here, and I'll be like, it should do it in this file. I'll still do the screenshot so it knows what I'm talking about, like this, and pass this in. I'll start this. And then what I'm going to do differently here is I'm just going to like follow what it's doing much more closely and make sure that it's doing it right. And I'm going to use the coder view here to really, like, as it makes each diff, to review it and make sure it's actually doing it in a way that I would want. And so how is Warp different from other tools? So like, I would say like tools like Bolt or Lovable or Replit are really different from Warp. Like those to me are about, building 0 to 1 like web app type things. Warp is much more similar to something like Claude Code or Cursor in that it's a local app that is primarily geared towards like working on code bases that have been checked out onto your local machine. And we're different from like Cursor and Windsurf and those types of things in that we're terminal based. And I actually think that's the right direction for the future, in that I think people are going to be using the editing features in IDEs less and less. And it makes much more sense to have an interface that's just geared around like launching and guiding agents. But we're different from things like Claude Code and Gemini CLI and Codex CLI, which are also terminal based, in that we aren't like a CLI app, meaning like we're not just like a text-based app that runs within the terminal. We have a much like nicer, more usable UI that also includes what we think of as like some of the key features from the IDE. And so, our key like editing features aren't about like typing code out. They're about like reviewing the change the agent is making, which I think is what you want today if you're doing pro development with agents. So this is going to make this change. And then what I'll do here, which I think is pretty cool, is I'll go ahead and like review it in Warp as though I'm like reviewing a diff inside of GitHub. I'll look at it, and if I see something that I don't like, and I see like something here that I want it to change, what I'll do is I'll go up here, and literally as though I'm giving it like a code review, I will click on this like add diff as context button, and I'll be like, can you change, I don't know why this is still going. Can you change the overlay to be offset from the right? And so I'm referencing a diff, and it's like the idea here is much more like I'm like doing a code review on the agent's code than it is that I am like purely vibing it, or that I'm purely like writing it from scratch. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. It does make sense.
So we'll see. I think that this will probably work, and then I can kind of, get out of Warp here if you want to stop looking at me do things, but I will run this. We'll see if it built it. But this is like, yeah, this is kind of how I use agents to code on real code base. I have it do small focus changes where I give it explicit instructions. I code review it as it goes. And I make sure that it's done in a way that like, that I understand and that I could actually send up to someone on my team for them to review. And I really think this is going to be like the primary workflow that pro devs do when they're building with agents is going to be around like this like tight like iteration loop with them. So that's what we're building right now.
We have a few questions from chat, but actually what you just said was really good. So just to summarize that for everyone, when we're going through that development cycle, right? Like you're building something that you intend to actually for people to use. Do you have like a brief framework that you usually go by? Like for example,
I do.
With the idea. Oh, wonderful. Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah. So, and actually it's public. I think people might find it interesting. So we have with Warp all of these like public things that I've like written up and iterated on with the team over time. And one of them is this like thing that's relatively new, which is how Warp uses Warp to build Warp. Can you see my screen here?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, so we have a sort of internal mandate now where we're trying to start every coding task by prompting. But we also have like these guidelines. And I think, again, it's not so much if you're vibe coding a personal app for fun, but if you're vibe coding an app that you want to be able to merge the code, some of the key principles here are like, you're responsible for the code yourself. Hold on, Warp is just building here. And let me actually see if it built this feature for me. Yeah, so see how it built this tooltip? It worked. It's cool. There's a little bug where it goes under this, but if I go in here now, I get a nice right-aligned tooltip. Anyhow, so back to this. The engineer is still fully responsible. So the way that we use these tools is like the engineer uses it as like a personal productivity accelerator, and then they send it up to someone on the team to review as though they wrote it by hand. We have a guideline around not just telling the agent what outcome, but telling the agent how to make the change. And this is really important because, I'm really worried that people who we hire onto Warp are going to forget how to code on Warp or not ever learn it. And so if you ask someone to like tell the agent how to make the change, it does like remove some of the magic if you just tell the agent what feature you want built, but it also makes sure that the engineers on the team are learning how the code works. Breaking down the coding tasks into small components, not one-shotting large changes, making sure you understand what Warp is doing, really investing time in learning how to prompt, because like, the quality of what you get out of these agents right now is very much like, it depends on like how you prompt and what context you provide. And then for us, since we're building an AI development tool, I really want people reporting issues and like we're all dogfooding the product and trying to make it better. And this is public. If feel free to like check this out. It's notion.warp.dev. Share the link if you want. I'm going to stop my sharing for a sec.
Yeah, I'll send it out. I actually think that was really helpful. Like, guys, I actually think what he just showed there is more important than anything that we could vibe code, because that is how you actually build sustainable things and build a
that's our best guess, by the way. Like, I think everyone is figuring this out, but like, I think that's our point of view on how to like vibe code in production, essentially.
So I think for anybody who wants to get that, I'll send it out. Just sign up for the email list here, and I'll send a recap. We always send a recap with all the resources there, so the link will be there as well.
Cool.
So I do think that is really, really helpful. So a few questions that people have here. Can Warp work on an existing code base from Git?
Yeah, that's easy. I might as well share for another second if I'm going to answer Warp questions. But to do that, you just kind of go, if you open a new tab, you'll have this ability to just like clone a repository, put in a Git URL. It will set everything up for you. It'll It'll also learn your code base. So it will index it and let you search across it. Very easy to do.
Says, what are the usage limits?
So we have a few different plans. We give everyone who's a free user, I think it's 150 requests, although we're starting an experiment right now where we let people have 2 weeks free of Pro. Pro plan has 2,500 requests per month. Turbo plan is 10,000. And if you're really going to go for it, there's a Lightspeed plan at 50,000. And then at any time, you can also just pay usage base if you prefer. That's the other option.
Question from Data Metal Machine. How does Warp leverage MCP servers?
Well, I might as well keep sharing Warp. So MCP is really easy to set up in Warp. So if you go into Warp, there is this area in Warp, which I didn't really spend any time showing people, but it's like a kind of, I don't know if people in here have used Postman, but it's a place where you can store like sort of like shareable knowledge and commands. If you go down here, one of the things you can set up in here is MCP servers. And so it's compatible with sort of Cursor, Windsurf. You can see I have a whole bunch of them that I've set up, like Figma and Linear and Notion and Sentry and Slack. And so it's really easy. You just go over here, you click add, you paste in the JSON. We're trying to make this even easier by adding a sort of gallery of common ones.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to address is the new launch that you guys just did. Would you be able to just explain a little bit about what has changed? Like, how is that a big deal? Because I think it kind of is.
Yeah, so the thing that's really changed is that we're trying to get to a point where a developer can use Warp as their primary tool. Like, and you know, in the past, I think a lot of people would use Warp as a terminal and then like VS Code or Cursor as an IDE. And we're trying to make it so you don't have to context switch and have multiple subscriptions to AI tools. And so we've added features that let you do coding in Warp, essentially. The launch is called Code in Warp. The simplest ones to understand are like now when you're inside of a repo, you can just go and like open up files here. You can edit them. They get syntax highlighting. It's like a nice lightweight editor. I can also hit Command O and open up, more code here and get like a tab display. I get the code review feature that I showed you earlier, which again, this is also editable. So if I wanted to go in here and just change this over it and save it, I could do that. And so there's a bunch of other features too around just like the quality of the code that Warp produces. And so we spent a bunch of time trying to get to the top of the public benchmarks, which we did a pretty good job at. We're like number 3 on SweetBench Verified and number 1 or 2 on Terminal Bench. So it's a really, really high quality coding agent also. But yeah, the basic thing is like none of these things existed before. And so we've really tried to make the experience, if you want to build stuff in Warp, really awesome without leaving the app.
Wonderful. So I do have a question from somebody who emailed in this question, and I think it's a really good question. And then we can go back to answering a little bit more questions if you don't mind staying.
Yeah, no, I'm down.
My voice. Okay, so this is actually from Richard Hack, who is currently here. So he says, just saw this on a register site. AI code assistants make developers more efficient at creating security problems. Fixes typos, creates time bombs. The firm found that AI-assisted developers produce 3 to 4 times more code than their unassisted peers, but also generated 10 times more security issues. So this is essentially true for code intended to be run on the internet using the sort of frameworks most web applications use. So he asked if you'd be interested to see what Zach has to say about this. It should be covered in any discussion about vibe coding.
Yeah, I think this comes back to just like there's vibe coding for personal use, and then there's vibe coding for production code bases. And to me, like it's all the stuff we've been talking about. So if you're doing production vibe coding, if you want to call it that, I think having something like culturally where the people who are doing the vibe coding are using something like our Notion doc, where it's like you have to be responsible for the code at exactly the same level as if you wrote it yourself. And you have to be telling the agent how to do the code, not just like what outcome you want. I think that really and you're doing small incremental changes. And so if you adopt the workflow of like working like a professional engineer would work, but just using the agent to sort of accelerate your work, but not diminish your understanding or learning, that's got to be like the best sort of defense against this. I think that there's, other stuff that is more, you can do in terms of like having AI code reviewers or linters or good security rules in your GitHub repo that become, more important, that can help catch some of these issues. And like, I think you can ask actually an agent to do security reviews on your code. This is something cool that Claude Code launched, but that actually Warp supports as well. I could just be like, can you do a security review on the change that I have going? And having even an agent sort of passively doing that makes sense. So I think like, honestly, the biggest thing is like culture. And then the second biggest thing is using tools like Warp, where you can really closely track what the agent is doing and then make it easy to understand the agent's work. And the third thing is some set of better tooling for catching the types of issues that agents are likely to introduce. But it's a really good question. I don't know if that answers it, but that's my take.
Richard says, thank you. So I think that was a really good answer. That was a really good answer. Okay. So when you are, the thing is with Warp, by the way, guys, the Warp as a company was started prior to everybody trying to do like vibe coding and doing a bunch of stuff. So this is like not like Zach being like, let me jump on the AI trend. Warp has actually been around for 5 years. Isn't it, Zach? More than 5 years?
5 years. Yeah, we started during COVID.
Yeah, so it has been like, Warp initially, my understanding, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Zach, but it was very much not like, let me make it AI. It was like as a terminal, a reimagined terminal. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Like, in fact, so the history of AI in Warp, if people are interested, is we started adding AI before ChatGPT. So we used something called Codex, which was what sort of like powered the initial GitHub Copilot. And we used it to sort of like translate natural language into terminal commands. When ChatGPT came out, we were like, oh, this is really cool and applies really well to the terminal. And so our view was like, how can we use AI to make the terminal more usable? And so I think we went through a period where I would call Warp like an AI assisted terminal. And then, we sort of understood the trend of the models to be more and more powerful. And, this year we fully went in on just like, Warp's not even really a terminal anymore. It's like a place to tell your computer what to do. And you can tell it what to do in terminal commands, but you can also tell it in agents. And it just like kind of happens. I think we're kind of lucky that the UI that we built and the form factor that we built around making the terminal work really well works super duper well for launching and managing and iterating with agents. So I think we kind of got lucky, to be honest.
Was there anything challenging having to adapt to the whole AI situation coming up as you're building this company?
Very. Like, I mean, there was like, so some developers really skeptical of AI, allergic to it, think it's going to result in like, shitty code or loss of skills, lots of jobs. There are people who are very like terminal purists who kind of tend to not like Warp anyways, just to be honest. Like we're kind of controversial on Hacker News, and that's fine. And there was internal debate of like, how much do we embrace AI versus just like trying to like, focus on building a better terminal. And then there was like challenges around like, what's the right user experience for AI? And like we had what a lot of apps had for a while, like a chat panel. And we sort of had to iterate and realize like, that's not a good, that UI within a terminal makes no sense because the terminal itself is like already a thing that accepts input. So there was a lot of challenges to get it right. We finally launched something that I thought was really good in the middle of 2024 that we called Agent Mode, which is actually like the first thing called Agent Mode. A lot of people have taken that name, which is fine. And then just a few months ago, we full on went into like, this is like a platform for building with agents, and relaunched Warp as Warp 2, an agentic development environment. And at that point, we're not even calling Warp a terminal at this point. So it's a pretty big shift.
that is a big pivot. So when you were going
Yeah.
through this process, how did you feel? Like just from your perspective as the CEO, you have investors, you've like raised money previously. This is your second company as well.
Yeah.
Like how did you navigate all of that?
So what's interesting is like, even though the product has changed a lot, the actual like mission of the company didn't change at all. So the mission of the company right from the start was like empowering developers to ship better software more quickly. And even the product vision, like our product vision has always been try to build like the tool that developers spend their day in, like shipping software. And so those two things work perfectly well, whether there's AI in Warp or not. So it wasn't like we had to shift wasn't like we were like a marketing company and became like a developer company or something. It was more just like, oh my God, this like paradigm changing technology came out in the middle of our like startup journey. And we're like, we just have to take advantage of that. It fits too well and will help us, kind of achieve the mission of the company. It's like, it took us from being like something that developers really liked as a tool to something that developers are really willing to pay a lot of money for, which is what you want, obviously, as a business. And so, it was really just like, once we like realized where the world was heading, like how quickly can we do it, more or less. And like, it wasn't that easy to change. Like, it was a lot of work to like change the product, build the agent really good. The models had to get better and so on. But like, I think it wasn't like such a struggle of like, should we do this or not? Once we saw where the world was going.
Got it. So if somebody were to build something right now, right? Not
Yeah.
necessarily build something like a developer tool. They could be building a developer tool, they could be building something else, they could be vibe coding it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you think that after the whole everybody got really into AI and this whole like AI thing started happening, is there any shift in that, in how people start building businesses? Would you have built it differently if you were to do that now as opposed to 5 years ago?
That's an awesome question. I think so. I know a lot of startup founders. I invest in some companies, actually. I think most people who are starting a business right now, they're obviously building an AI company where their product has AI, but they're also building their products using all of these AI tools, right? So using things like Warp or Cursor, Cloud Code. And it's interesting because you can I think you can get pretty far really fast, but I don't know if you can build something as complicated. Not that complicated is a good thing, but like as like hard or like sophisticated of a thing as Warp, or even I'll pick a different app. Like if you wanted to build like Figma today or Notion or Google Docs, you couldn't vibe code your way to those. And so I'm really curious if people sort of hit a ceiling on the types of apps that they're building, and then realizing like, okay, I actually need still to hire people who are like a little bit more experienced as engineers. But I think everyone is going from like 0 to 1 super duper fast right now. It's just like what the 1 is has a slightly lower sort of ceiling. And like, we spent years building Warp, before any AI existed. So it's very different.
Okay, interesting. So fundamentally, it sounds like the vision and the mission is still the same, but maybe the way that you're doing it may be different.
Yeah, like if we had started Warp like 2 months ago, I think we would be really using AI tooling very, very heavily to bootstrap it. I do think, though, we would still need a bunch of engineers because there's some hairy problems with it that are hard for the AI to solve. And also because like I would be really sort of scared on the ceiling of what the app would be just through vibe coding right now. Maybe that's a more succinct answer than my first answer.
Got it. Thank you for entertaining that question. So we are a little bit over time. Perhaps we can wrap up with some other questions from the chat.
Sure.
Let's see. So first of all, yes, all the questions. This entire live stream is going to be is going to stay here. So don't worry if you want to tune back to it. Question from Roger Stottle. where in a software development process from 0 to 1 is where Warp fits the best?
So great question. I think where Warp really has some unique advantages is like it does the full life cycle. So it's really great at setting up new projects, bootstrapping them, interacting with Git, interacting with Docker. It, as of our most recent launch, I think is like world class in producing code. So I do think we're good there and competitive with like Cursor or Claude Code. And then I think Warp is very different and unique in terms of everything that happens once you've written the code, in terms of like, you know, launching it to production and even debugging production. In that a lot of stuff that the tools that are really important for that are CLI based tools. And so Warp is awesome at like pulling logs or doing work in AWS or G Cloud or Vercel or any sort of infrastructure stuff, or like letting you work in your database, letting you debug hairy things. So that's where we're really, really good, is kind of in the breadth of what we can do compared to some of the other tools.
Question from Alex. Will there be Warp hackathons?
We haven't done one yet. We go and like we sponsor a ton of hackathons. We've yet to organize a Warp hackathon. If people are interested in that, I think it's time to do it, because we're also we just launched our first like thing that people can build on top of rather than just building using Warp. Meaning like in our preview group, we now have a Warp CLI, which lets you run Warp's agent on any machine. And so that lets you build apps where Warp is like the back end. And so I do think it's very likely that in the next few months we'll do some sort of hackathon or have people try to build cool stuff on top of that.
Oh, I think you guys really should. And count me in if you
Cool.
Some type of involvement. I would love to be involved in some fashion if you guys do a hackathon.
Awesome.
Okay, so from Ike Victor, are you going to add a Grok code fast one?
We have like a relationship with the Grok team. We have access. We simply haven't done the stuff that we do to like validate that it would be useful for the model to be available to our users. So I think the answer is like probably, but no firm ETA. And then like our kind of approach to launching these new models is like, we want there to be some use case that it's like really good at and valuable for. Otherwise, there's just like a gajillion models that could go into Warp. And so we have to sort of like run the evals and see where it's at. And I'm curious for people on the Grok team what they think it's best at. But probably yes, but we have not done it yet.
Cool. From JD, what's missing in Warp, for example, to get an app to a finished product on the App Store, where it can be done, but with a little bit of manual help from the developer?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, for most apps, you can do it. Like there's stuff that would be nice to have where Warp would work better, that we're obviously focusing a bunch on building. And so like just throw out some stuff that we're going to improve. Like our code editor is pretty basic right now. You know, we're not trying to rebuild an IDE by any stretch, but there's certain features that people expect in a code editor, like language server support, that we need to add and we'll add. Warp doesn't work completely well on remote machines. That's like another area where we're trying to make it really good, so that if you're like doing remote development or SSHing, you get the full power of Warp's agent. But honestly, you should be for most apps, and like, yeah, for most apps, you should be able to just like ask Warp to do it, ask Warp to submit your stuff to whatever, Vercel or an app store. And if it can't do it, it'll tell you, but it should be able to just do it. It's pretty wild.
Let us choose 2 more questions. Okay, so from Richard Hack as well, ask him about curated models versus roll your own.
I'm not sure I understand. Maybe can you have Richard expand? Like,
Richard,
is it like local versus like foundation models, or like fine tuning models, or like, I guess
I think it means like fine tuning the models themselves and like doing things to the models themselves. Versus,
yeah, so we do a little bit of that. We have honestly just like, we've tested a gajillion things and like eval everything. We have the most success just using the strongest state-of-the-art foundation model and then doing a whole bunch of context and prompt engineering to get it to work well, which there is a lot to that. We're not doing like much in the way of fine tuning. We do now, for the first time, we have some specialized models that we ship in Warp. Like we just shipped a new model for detecting whether or not what you're typing is a terminal command or an agent prompt. And that's like a BERT model where we had to do like a bunch of like sort of like training on it ourselves. But you know, we're mostly focused on like context engineering, prompt engineering of the biggest, most state-of-the-art foundation models.
Got it. All right. Final question from Alex. What's the future of ADE for solopreneurs with no software or code experience trying to build a business?
I think you're going to be able to do it up to some level of like complexity of app right now. And Warp should be super duper helpful for you being able to do that. I think that the ceiling of the app that you're able to build is going to just keep going up. And so I think right now it's like, if, you know, you can build like a really cool personal web app, I think like in a year, it's going to be something that's more production ready. In 2 years, it's going to be like, it's going to be awesome. So I think anyone who's like building shit, like should just keep on digging in and learning, and like, it's going to get better.
What do you think people should build?
Like this is in my general like founder mode. Okay, like if you want to build a business, like build something that's useful. Like it's, I think, easier said than done. Pick a big problem that people have, that you care about, that you personally have passion for solving. And like try to build something where it's like the world's a little bit better, or like there's a workflow in the world that's easier to do because of the thing that you built. I think, you know, if you want like real like founder advice, like if you're going to like start a company and you want to sort of start it, and like if you want to sort of get funding for it, I would pick a really big, hard idea if you have the appetite for it. The world needs more people who are trying to like fix important problems for lots of people. And I think it's super cool that the barrier to doing that has come down. So I would pick a useful thing, pick a big thing, and that you're passionate about, try to build it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Zach, also for staying over by 19 minutes to answer everybody's question. Thank you so much. I think this is a very interesting discussion, and also great that we can also learn more about Warp as well. I think showing it was very helpful in explaining what exactly Warp is.
This was fun. I'm really grateful for you having me on, and for everyone who took the time to watch it. This was super fun for me. So thank you, Tina.
Thank you all so much. All right. Well, let's say goodbye to Zach for now, and I will see you guys in the next video or live stream.
Cool.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Thank you all. I will shut down the live stream now. Okay, live stream is done. So
cool.
How are you feeling?
Good. How'd that go? Think people were engaged?
Good.